Welcome to the next Lessons from the Animals series episode. In this video, we're going to be talking about the snake. And the lesson that we're going to learn from the snake is flexibility and flexible attack. Because if you look at a snake, right, it's essentially a spine, a living, breathing spine, right? It doesn't have four limbs, doesn't have a lot of tendrils or legs. It's just undulating, and that's how it kind of weaves its way along the surface, right? So we're trying to learn from this example. So first, we're going to talk about how this flexibility allows us to have actually more power. Because normally when we talk about flexibility in martial arts, at least on a surface level, people think, oh, flexibility in martial arts, yes, I can kick high, right? I can kick people in the face. That's good flexibility. And then it's kind of, not really looked at much deeper than that. And at that point, it's useful, but not really as useful as, say, things like power or speed, right? And positioning and timing and such like that. So it's looked at as, I guess, a surface level, like it'd be great if you're flexible, but you don't really need it. But in this, we're going to learn that flexibility actually helps us to add to power. Because a lot of us throughout our daily lives, especially people who live more stagnant lives where we don't stretch as much, we tend to have our spine move in like a block. Where if I want to turn to the left, my whole body turns to the left. I turn right, whole body turns to the right. If you ever watched Batman's old videos, like his old movies, there's that one time where he had the suit that was so stiff and inflexible. Or look around, he had to turn his whole torso because he couldn't, turn his neck to save his life. So in that same way, we're trying to break up the stagnation within the spine so that we're not like this. Because at that point, right, if I can only move my spine in this static way, I'm only engaging certain muscle groups to turn my body that way. But if I can break up the stagnation in the spine, and I can, say, move one vertebra at a time, it allows for more muscular engagement to take place within the torso as we chain a motion together. So if I were to, say, throw a black tiger punch like this, right? I push my feet into the ground, I turn my hips, and that happens to turn my shoulders, which then propels my punch out, right? But if I soften the torso a little bit, I push my foot into the ground, I turn my hips, and then one at a time, my vertebra will turn one after another in a sort of whip-like fashion as it gets up to my shoulders and then out my hand, right? Now, you might think, oh, it's just flexibility, but it's actually going to add more force because you're actually adding more muscularity engagement. Because as I turn from one vertebra to the next, to the next, to the next, it's a subtle using of the muscularity in the torso to engage more muscle groups on its way up. So it's essentially adding a chain reaction of events into the punch, right? So if we have pushing into the ground with the foot, that's one part of the chain. If we have turning of the hips, that's a second part of the chain, right? And then each vertebra adds another part to the chain and just propels and accelerates from there. So it actually can really increase your fighting power in that way. But it doesn't limit itself at power. Now we're going to talk about how flexibility itself, not just in kicking high, but flexibility of the torso and your technique can help in things like, for example, anti-china or anti-joint locks, anti-throws, and stuff like that. So type of grappling stuff where you might get joint locks and stuff, or somebody might grab onto you, right? If you grab onto the snake, say you grab onto the center of the snake, right? You can try to pick it up. It's not going to stiffen itself and then become like a board and now you got a stick to whack things with. No, it's going to soften and coil itself around your hand, right? To fully lock up a snake, you'd have to grab it from both ends and then pull, right? But if you just grab onto the center, it's just going to wrap around and constrict. So in this way, our whole body should be like that. We should be fully flexible and changeable. So if someone grabs onto our wrist and elbow, right, and to try to put us into an armbar, we should be able to soften and go with the flow of the technique in order to loosen the armbar so that we can escape it, right? Or if someone tries to put us into a joint lock like that, like this one called bind the tiger, right? You can weave your way out of it. Or with Crow Flips' body, you can weave your way out of it or weave your way out of it. The way with this flexibility, it essentially makes you very, very difficult to lock up or to restrain because you don't stiffen up. The more you stiffen up, the easier it is to lock you up because right, you become brittle. Then you can easily be broken. And it's giving something to latch onto, right? If I can grab onto a hard object and then I get control of that hard object. But if I grab a pile of mush, right, it's just going to slip through my fingertips. So that's what we want to become like. We want to become like water in their hands, or like a snake that they've gripped that's then coiling back around them. So in ways it can be used as anti-chinna, as well as it can be used for unusual angles for attacks, right? So I might start with like striking downwards, maybe towards the groin or towards the solar plexus. I might strike, and then the opponent might block it downwards, right? But then I might turn and then allow this to strike upwards towards the neck, right? So in this way, I weave my way through. Whatever happens to block me, I don't become stiff and then I resist, but I allow that to turn my attack into something else. I allow it to change me, to adapt to the situation. So if I throw a technique in this way, instead of trying to blast my way through it, I let it turn it into something else. So here I let it hinge, right? And I get an elbow strike out of this, right? Or maybe I try to come around the side here, so I can't smash my way through here, but if I might pull back, right? So if somebody tries to block, I might hit and then allow that to pull back, and I weave my way through to strike. So in this way, we learn how to flexibly attack someone and not try to fight strength on strength, but to weave around them. Because the idea of snake in our system is the idea that we're trying to climb a tree. The tree is the opponent, metaphorically speaking. And I'm the snake climbing the branches, which is their limbs. And I'm trying to get at the weak points, right? In our Ma family style, we have a metaphor for snake boxing to give us a bearing for how our body should generate force. So we have it, whereas Dantian, the point where we originate our movement, right, is looked at as like a nest of eggs. And then the limbs, right, are the two snakes, but they're two snakes that are intertwined. So I have one snake here, and then around the spine, they're intertwined with each other, wrapping around and protecting the nest of eggs, and then their tails go out to the legs. So my legs are the tail of the snake, and then my hands are the heads of the snake. And in some styles of snake boxing, you tend to see, like, right, they use a lot of techniques up here, but you see their body is very much like a block, right? They move, they target, but they have this as like a block. So it's like this is the end of the snake in that regard. And in our style, we look at this as very poor snake boxing because it's not engaging enough of the torso. And so the idea here is that if I'm going to do any kind of snake boxing, the snake can't stop here, but it has to go all the way down, intertwine into my legs. So if I'm going to, say, throw this strike here, I can't just do here. I have to whip all the way from my leg, right? So I whip all the way and I undulate my spine and then whip forward. And that gets more power through the movement and allows more flexibility of the spine to weave around opponents, right? This is also used as a sort of bobbing and weaving, right? So we talk a lot about bobbing, weaving with the head, but bobbing, weaving with the body is just as important, right? Because, well, yes, today there's a lot of headhunters because like everybody likes to see boxing. They don't really understand that this is like just as good a target, right? Because it doesn't take a lot to break ribs. So someone might come in low, and instead of like just eating it, I duck my torso out of the way and then come around, or I might weave. So it might be a punch coming in this way. I will weave my way out of the way and a counterattack. So you have to be willing to bob and weave with your head as well as your body itself. So the whole body must be the snake. That's how we truly get the flexibility and the flexible attack that I'm talking about in this video. All right, so that's the snake and the flexible attack that we're learning in this video. See you in the next one.